Well, there's no other way to say it. That one stung for the Cardinals on Thursday night. What's going on, everyone, and welcome in to this edition of B-Schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you here Thursday evening, August 1st, 2024. Cardinals at Wrigley Field on Thursday. It seemed like everything was going along swimmingly. Ryan Helsley was an out away, a strike away from getting the Cardinals the win, extending to a 3-game winning streak for the Cardinals, entering the weekend with the Cubs on a high note. Everything was going well until it wasn't, as the Cardinals lose in walk-off fashion to the Cubs on Thursday night. 5-4, Mike Tauchman comes up with the big swing for Chicago as the Cubs score 3 runs against Ryan Helsley there in the ninth inning to win it 5-4. Tonight on B-Schaeff Daily, we will talk about the game, the good parts, which include Sonny Gray having a bounce-back outing that the Cardinals really needed to see from him, Paul Goldschmidt continuing his recent hot stretch, and is this something that can be prolonged and sustained for the Cardinals' number 3 hitter in the game, as it were, on Thursday. And, of course, what happened there in the ninth inning is the Cardinals' closer, who has been so sharp all season long, leading the league in saves, had not entered a game in the ninth inning where the Cardinals held the lead, in which the team did not walk away with that win. A couple of blown saves that he had previously. He ended up being the winning pitcher in those 2 games. So this was a rare situation for Ryan Helsley in terms of the result. We'll talk a little bit about how we've seen close calls from Helsley this season, and maybe it was only a matter of time before you had one that got away from him on the road like this one did. But I want to put to rest the narratives and the thought processes surrounding this loss as to maybe who's to blame. I'll tell you who's to blame, and I'll tell you why that's not the end of the world as it pertains to this individual. Might be some Cardinals fans making more of it than it is on social media, and shame on me for allowing those people to infiltrate my little bubble, because I did play the back-and-forth game with a few folks on Thursday night on the Twitter tweets, but I gotta say, sometimes I just cannot help myself. But I'll try to stop. I'll try to be better, and we'll try to be as good as we can be in breaking down this Cardinals game, and we'll go down on the farm tonight as always. Well, not always, but as usually is the case, as this was a Thursday, so there were minor league games to talk about, and we'll tell you what happened in some of them tonight on B-Schaeff Daily. Also, we'll give you some roster news updates. There were a couple of them. Let's go ahead and start with that, and then we'll get into the game. But before I do provide those roster updates, want to ask that you would subscribe to this channel if you enjoy St. Louis Cardinals content on the daily throughout the year. This is the place to be, so subscribe and check out the link in the description to the YouTube channel membership if you'd like to support the channel in that way. The B-Schaeff Daily Lounge tier also gets you into a private group chat on Discord, and the Discord link should be in there as well, and that is free to join on just the most basic levels. I do believe we're over 200 members now in the Discord, all Cardinals fans. I do have a couple of other channels within the Discord server for Mizzou football and some fantasy football stuff, but nobody's really used that yet. It's been all Cardinals talk and stadium pictures, and for a while, we had the trade polls channel going hot and heavy, so a lot of cool Cardinals stuff to check out on Discord. The link is right below this video in the description. You can't miss it, but if you do, I'm at bschaefer12 on Twitter. Hit me up with a direct message and let me know you'd like to be in the Discord, and I'll help guide you if you can't find the link yourself. All right, let's go ahead and get into tonight's game. Cardinals lose at 5-4, and that just was not the vibe that we thought we were going to get from this game as the early innings and middle innings proceeded. The Cardinals and Cubs were locked into a tight one until you got there into the 6th inning, and the Cubs actually took a very brief lead over the Cardinals before Mason Wynn struck back in the 7th inning, a 2-run home run to help put the Cardinals back ahead. Cardinals ended up leaving that top of the 7th with a 4-2 lead, and that basically sets things up exactly the way you'd want it for your bullpen. And the back end guys, we saw Jojo Romero look really sharp. A couple of strikeouts in 1 inning of work as he threw the 8th. But this was not the best day of the year for Ryan Helsley, and it's one that he wants to forget, as when it was all said and done, he was only able to complete 2/3 of an inning, gave up 4 hits, 3 runs, all of them earned. The home run against Cody Bellinger happened on an off-speed pitch. It wasn't like he threw the fastball and got clocked by Bellinger and then decided that he wasn't going to throw any more fastballs, but it was a situation where a pitch that he doesn't throw very often at all, I think, spooked him after it got taken deep. It was a curveball that he left up in the zone to Bellinger. At least that's the way it registered on StatCast, and it did kind of look that way. It just, you're looking at that pitch going, oh man, he just hung one. That's not It's the only curveball he threw, according to StatCast, in the entire outing, and Bellinger knew what to do with it. So at that point, it's like, okay, what's going to happen next? No, he was throwing fastballs, got Isaac Paredes on one. The base hit to Nico Hoerner ended up being a fastball. He jumps on the first pitch there to put the situation into the hands of Dansby Swanson. And at that point, yeah, Ryan Helsley threw a bunch of sliders in a row, and Dansby Swanson eventually found one that was, well, he had something easy to do with it. And the final pitch to Mike Tauchman was 98.9 miles per hour, so he did end up throwing some fastballs after that. I just think the lack of a pitch mix has really been an issue for Helsley this season. It seems as though when the fastball is something he's got confidence in and feels like he can direct and spot it and use it when and how he needs to, and the confidence in the pitch is there and in the command of the pitch is there, really no problem. He can basically force the batter to guess, you're going to get 100 or you're going to get 90 with some insane movement falling off the table. What's it going to be? You can kind of take your pick. And if you're up there guessing, you're probably going to lose. But in a scenario where within the context of an outing, Ryan Helsley is not mixing back and forth between the two, it kind of can allow guys to guess and guess right maybe. And when location is not as strong either, you're leaving yourself susceptible to that. Mentioned that the curveball was the one that Bellinger hit out, so that was unfortunate. The one curveball he threw was not a sharp one, and makes sense not to go back to it thereafter. But if you look at the way the rest of the outing broke down, and I'm checking this out via StatCast, he was bunching pitches up consecutively, lots of sliders in a row, and then to Tauchman went fastball, slider, and then fastball, the pitch that he served into left field to end the game. I don't know, you just didn't see a lot of mixing going on, and all Dansby saw were sliders, and I really didn't have an issue with it. It's just a matter of, and I will say, the one slider that he fouled off, it's listed as a slider on StatCast. I'd have to go back and watch that pitch in particular because it's listed 86.5. That may have been another curveball just based on the velocity or just a slider he took something off of. I'm not going to go back and watch it, but you get my point. He was throwing a lot of sliders to Dansby, and I think that's a perfectly fine pitch to throw to him. If you watch the first two pitches of the AB, I mean, he had him right there dead to rights. And then you had the review, and I know we're kind of working backwards with this game a little bit. Helsley is the stuff that people want to hear about, and so it's the stuff I'm going to talk about first. We will get to Sonny Gray. We will get to Paul Goldschmidt and the things that happened earlier in the game. But I want to start in the ninth inning because that's what everybody has on their minds. I'm looking at that Dansby at bat, and I understand this has been a topic of conversation on Twitter. I watched the Oli Marmol postgame from Wrigley. It seemingly was everything they showed on TV is everything that that they got. Now, there may have been some more questions from the writers thereafter that y'all should make sure to read everybody's game stories and columns of the reporters that are actually up there at Wrigley. Wanted to be there, but did not get sent for this trip. But I digress. I'm looking at that moment, and the moment where the Cardinals challenged the stolen base by Nico Hoerner at second, a lot of folks thought, well, why are you challenging that? It didn't really seem at first glance, or second glance for that matter, to be a particularly close play at second. I did think the throw was fine. It was a throw that bounced, but I don't really have a major issue with that because Donovan's able to pick it cleanly and put the glove right on the body pretty quickly. So I don't really think it was a bad throw by any means, but it was a little bit delayed, a little bit late because of the good jump by Hoerner. But Donovan holds the tag on the body the whole way through, and with replay review being what it is nowadays, you might not be able to tell in real time whether or not a guy did keep his toe drag on the base or did find a way to transfer once the hand comes off. Does the foot go on? Different things like that historically across Major League Baseball, and you might even think that's kind of lame. Like, are we really going to enhance down to the micro millimeter to say whether or not a guy held the bag when the fielder is holding the tag on him throughout the process? We are, and I understand that it's kind of a weird quirk of the game, but if you're the Cardinals in that spot, I think challenging the play is probably what you have to do. Now, there are some concerns of, well, one, for me, when I was watching it was, how hard is it actually raining there in Chicago? Because if it's raining and the rain picks up, and you've got Ryan Helsley there standing on the mound for a minute, 90 seconds, 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes sometimes on these replay reviews, does the field start to get soggy? And if they end up tying the game on you, how long does this thing go? Could there be a replay review that costs you a rain delay? Like, is that the pipeline that we're about to see here? That was quickly unfounded, and I was thinking through it. I'm like, there's no way. Day game on Friday scheduled. They're just not going to. They're going to find a way to play this through. But if it started pouring, I mean, we've seen that at times. There's just not really a lot you can do. It would have been a very untimely moment for Mother Nature to open up and cause some issues there. But I was still kind of thinking about it. But what a lot of Cardinals fans were probably thinking was Ryan Helsley is going to have to stand there and not really throw warm-up pitches and then get right back into the rhythm of the AB after this challenge is not overturned, which it wasn't overturned. But again, I just think in the moment there, you're in the Cardinals replay room, you're trying to find it on the fly. Is there a chance that and you say, look, you don't get to take it with you. You cannot take it with you on the challenge, so you might as well burn it there. And I understand the sentiment behind that. And I'm not going to come out and say that costs the Cardinals the game. If you're Oli Marmol, if you're the Cardinals coaching staff, you have to basically not leave it in your pocket at the end of the game, in my opinion. And you also have to trust, which I obviously they did, that your all-star closer is not going to be impacted to that extent where you should be catering to him and worrying that he might freeze up a little bit and not be as sharp if he has to have a couple of a minute delay. But that is something that we think about and talk about, so it would be not probably very appropriate for me to just ignore it completely. But I think I do land on the side of you got to challenge it. I'm not going to criticize Oli Marmol or his replay review guys to say, hey, go ahead and challenge it. Go ahead and use the challenge and see if we can't steal the game right here on the stolen base where Brendan Donovan did what he's supposed to do and held the tag the whole way through. Maybe they see just a millimeter of the guy coming off the bag and they're able to overturn it. It's not to say that the throw beat the runner to the bag, but that is the way that it works with replay now. You can obviously overturn that if he comes off the base, and replay can prove it. So I don't have a huge issue with it. Am I surprised to see that maybe Helsley wasn't quite as sharp in the immediate aftermath? Maybe, but it wasn't like he immediately threw the next pitch and Dansby Swanson ripped it. There were several more pitches of the at-bat before Swanson eventually got the base hit that tied the game. I was kind of surprised to see him at second base. Tommy Pham came up throwing pretty quickly out of left field, but the throw was a little bit toward the outfield side of the second base bag and was not able to get the runner Swanson at that point at second. That would have been something else that would have at least ended the inning and got the Cardinals to extras, but that was not meant to be. I just look at that and think Oli Marmol can't be managing to wonder if Ryan Helsley might get a little less sharpness on his pitches if he has to stand there for 90 seconds for a replay review. You have the reviews for a reason. You can't take it with you. I don't have an issue with it. However, the first two pitches to Dansby Swanson were so sharp from Helsley that there is a part of you that just maybe you make a different decision in that moment because you've watched the way that the inning unfolds and you say, Helsley has Dansby dead to rights right now, and there's no reason to give the batter the time to collect himself. That is just a catch-22 situation that I'm not going to pin on the manager, because I really do think if you're being told by your replay review room that there's a shot they're going to overturn this, you're just responding to their decision, right? That's the way this has to work because you're under the gun with time and the game has got to be moved on for pace of play. So that's one that I think people are going to criticize. I'm understanding, even if there are people tweeting at me saying, look, I was saying it in the moment, and I was sitting there at my house thinking it in the moment, but I also just don't think that that's a fair criticism necessarily to levy. And look, you can criticize it. That's what we do here. And we talk baseball, and it's very much an interesting, but that wasn't even a question that I, at least on the postgame with what they aired on Bally, that anybody asked Oli Marmol. And if they did, it was saved for off camera because the response was probably, come on, you got to be kidding me with that kind of question. So I get it. I just don't think that it was one that, if it's the other way around and we thought there might have been a chance that he was off the bag, to then waste the chance to use the replay review when it doesn't do you any good to have it in your pocket at the end of the day. I could legitimately see both sides on it, but I don't have an issue with Oli Marmol challenging in that spot. And keep in mind, he's hearing and responding to what he's being told from his replay guys. That he puts up the earphones to say, yeah, go ahead and challenge it, but he's not looking at the video himself. So he's responding to what others on the coaching staff are telling him. And typically the way that it's going to go 98 times out of 100 is if you've got your challenge yet to use in that situation that late in the game, you're just going to go ahead and use it. I can understand isolating it down to going, man, Ryan Helsley was a little bit iffy, but then in that one moment, he had given up the home run. But in that one moment, he looked like he had Dansby Swanson dead to rights. So it's kind of an interesting comparison to when we think about the other stuff that we had talked about going back to Friday's game with the intentional walk in the 10th inning, where you're like, well, you just set up the matchup because you know that Trey Lipscomb was the batter at that point against Ryan Fernandez, and there should be no reason to suspect that's not going to be a matchup won by Fernandez. That's exactly what should happen, is he wins the matchup and the Cardinals win the game. But obviously things can go differently. The unexpected can happen. So maybe this would have been a moment to say, regardless of whether there's a runner on second base, let's ignore that he's there because we just trust that Helsley's in a rhythm right now and we're not going to try to disrupt that. If that's your argument, I really do understand it. I'm not going to beat the table, though, to say, oh, this was such a mistake by Oli Marmol, it cost him the game. I had to send out some snarky tweets tonight because Ryan Helsley has been fantastic. The tweet that I saw from Brandon Kiley had the stat to say that the first time Helsley entered the game in the 9th inning this season where the Cardinals led and the Cardinals lost. That's the first time that it's happened all season. So to say some of the things that are being said on social media, and I get it, social media is always going to be, it's going to bring out the worst in people because you've got the opportunity to just say things out into the void and there's not any recourse for it. So I get it. I get caught up in it at times as well. But to say, oh, Ryan Helsley sucks, and I got one that said, oh, Marmol just let him blow the lead and then the game. Beautiful managing. And that's the one I had to retweet and say, just to be clear, if this is your stance on why the Cardinals lost the game, that it was because of Oli leaving in his all-star closing pitcher in the 9th inning. Please find Jesus and unfollow me, and not necessarily in that order. I had to be a little bit snarky about it, and I'm sorry to that guy that I kind of put on blast a little bit because people probably sent him some mean replies, which they should not be doing. I probably shouldn't have amplified it like that. Yeah, the guy did unfollow me. That's okay. I did ask for it. I did ask him to, but I should probably kind of tell that guy, yeah, that's my bad. I didn't mean to kind of put you on blast like that. But it's just amazing some of the things that people say out there after games where like that game just was not on Oli Marmol. It was on Ryan Helsley. Like that's whose fault it was that they lost the game. And all he said after on his post game, he said, I can't put this game on Ryan Helsley. Well, I'll agree with this sentiment and disagree with the fact that you can't, like he did. He had a bad game and the Cardinals lost as a direct result of it. The context is it's not like it makes Ryan Helsley be a bad pitcher or he's had a bad season. He had a bad game and it was in a bad time to have a bad game because the Cardinals lost as a direct result of him not being able to come through in the 9th inning. But these are, as Tony La Russa used to say, men, not machines. You cannot expect Ryan Helsley to be perfect in save situations this season. Again, I think it's his third blown save, and the other two, he was the winning pitcher in the game. So we can't look at this and say, oh, Ryan Helsley should have traded him. I mean, what are we doing with the reactionary thought processes, Cardinals fans? Like, come on now. You don't even believe that. Now, listen, if you're somebody who felt they should have traded him for the value proposition and you're out on this season and you're viewing this Cardinals season like you'd view it on Out of the Park Baseball and you really wanted them to be aggressive sellers and you wanted to play the simulation out and say, add prospects because it's not going to be your year in 2024. It's not going to be your year in 2025. You need a full hard reset. There are fans out there that feel that way, and I can't disrespect those feelings because, yeah, there's a pretty decent chance the Cardinals are stuck in the middle for a good long while in Major League Baseball, and for a lot of fans, that's not what you want to see. But I also think that it's easy to say, oh, no, sell because I want to see this Cardinals team reset and I want to rebuild so that they can add prospects and get high draft capital over the course of a couple of years and really then have the ability to jump back in and be competitive. You don't want to see a tanking situation. But I'll say that's not exactly what the fans who wanted Helsley traded, which it was a very small faction, I think, of fans. But those who are trying to put their business hat on and be savvy about it and say, look at what the price was for relief pitching in this trade market, and you probably could have gotten at least one top 100 prospect, maybe two, for Ryan Helsley. Totally understand that thought process, but I have continued to beat the drum for John Mozeliak in this front office. Owe it to the Cardinals fans that have supported the team and have come out to games and have continued to watch and continue to support to put out the best shot that they have at a winner this year. And even if that means sneaking into the wild card and not being able to advance beyond the first series, then that's what it means. But I think it's incumbent upon the organization to take their best shot at that. And that may not be the most, shrewd business move of it all. But you also, I don't think you trade away a Ryan Helsley when he's pitching the way that he is right now. Other GMs, man, other executives around baseball would make such a move, but I know that it's not going to be something John Mozeliak's front office is ever going to do. And if you're disappointed by that, then that's certainly within your rights. But it's just, I can't spend a whole heck of a lot of time dissecting that because frankly, it was never something that was under consideration. So to be like, man, they really should. They had two choices here. They could have gone route A or route B, and they chose the route that wasn't trading Helsley. That wasn't even something that ended up in their rearview mirror because it wasn't close enough to be able to see out the car. They were on a completely different road. That wasn't one that was a path they were eventually going to take. So it's hard to really get too deep into that thought process, but I understand that some people had it. But no, Ryan Helsley does not suck because he had one bad game. I would say it's fair to say they lost today because of him, but that's also the name of the game. When you're a closing pitcher, you're going to have some games in your life where you're the last guy on the mound and the other team is ripping off the guy's shirt who got a hit against you. That's just going to be the way that it goes sometimes. It does not make Ryan Helsley a bad pitcher. I think his ERA for the season is up to 2.70. He is one of the, if not the best closer in baseball still even after this moment. There is something to be said for the lack of confidence in the fastball at times. I consider that he doesn't have the confidence in it for a couple of reasons. Command may be one of the reasons, but also I think it's just maybe a headspace thing at this point, particularly when facing the Cubs, because when you think back to maybe it was Memorial Day weekend, whatever weekend that series was where the Cardinals played the Cubs and Helsley had some a rough go of it, but was able to survive it. I think that was even at Busch Stadium, if I'm not mistaken, but he was able to kind of grit through, and in those games, the Cardinals ended up winning. I don't think he blew a save that weekend, if I'm recalling correctly, but that was sort of the moment where it started to seem like the fastball was an issue for Helsley for a while, and then we saw him kind of come out of that. Was he tipping against the Cubs? Did they figure something out against him? Did it just get into his head for a while, and he was sort of thinking through his mechanics and different things more than you want to see? Because at a certain point, you just want instinct to take over. You've repeated this delivery so many times. You don't want to have to be thinking about every little part of your pitch and of your process as you're out there. Sometimes it's just best to let the instinct take over. And so I think Helsley might have been in his head for a little while, but we spoke on it about this on the show, how for the Cardinals to continue winning when he was out there and sort of trying to feel his way through for a while, like it seemed like he was for the majority of the month of June, he wasn't blowing saves, and the Cardinals were getting away with it and getting through the period of time where Helsley was maybe not at his sharpest. And that was something that we felt like was part of the reason the Cardinals were able to go on the run that they did, because even as he was not at 100%, you could see it. He was as reliable as you could possibly be in a closer. And now we've seen him sort of turn the corner, but now this past month, wasn't used all that much. People were kind of criticizing that. Oh, only 5 appearances in the last 25 days or whatever the stat was. I'm not even going to look it up. Look, there's an all-star break in the middle of that. He was, prior to the all-star break, dealing with a little bit of an injury. What was it? The hip situation. So when people look back at the beginning of the month of July and see the spots that you maybe could have, I can recall it might have been that National Series over right after 4th of July weekend. I'd have to go look in maybe that Pittsburgh series over 4th of July, whatever the case was. Earlier in the month, there were moments where maybe Ryan Helsley could have been pitching but was not in, and it would save scenarios, and we were kind of wondering how available was he. Well, then it came out after the All-Star break when the Cardinals had deemed Ryan Helsley should not pitch in the All-Star game. He was dealing with something in the hip, and they wanted to get him the extra rest. So you can't then turn back around and say, oh, it's Oli Marmol's fault for not getting him enough work. Go back in the latter part of July's schedule and find me the moments that Ryan Helsley should have been pitching where he didn't. I think it's just one of those quirks of the schedule that happens. And Oli Marmol was asked by Jim the Cat Hayes. I saw this on the Bally Sports postgame show. It's a question that I think a good reporter has to ask, but Oli Marmol responded to it in about the way that I would expect Oli Marmol to feel about it, which is, Cat asked him, do you think that played a factor at all? Has it really been used a lot recently? And Oli's response in full was, quote, no, end quote. Just didn't, what else is there really to say about it? The game scenarios have not painted themselves toward Helsley as often recently. And I know that might be kind of crazy to believe, but if you think about it, the Cardinals have had a few games recently where they've won by a lot of runs, and sometimes they they lose by a handful of runs. You're not going to bring in Ryan Helsley other than the situations in which you're going to bring him in, because what happens when you bring in Helsley just to, quote, get him some work? We've seen it a little bit when the Cardinals have a 4-run lead in the ninth inning, and I was asked by my buddy Luke tonight in a direct message on Twitter. He said, let me ask you a hypothetical. What if the Cardinals had scored a few more runs and they end up with a 4-run lead going into the ninth inning where Helsley comes out? Do you still throw Ryan Helsley in the bottom of the ninth if they had scored some and gotten insurance in the top of the ninth? And I said it was a fun question. I'm not 100% sure, but I think if he had already been warmed up, that would have been the scenario to go ahead. And yes, you just use Helsley in a 4-run game anyway to get him the work. But otherwise, you're not just hunting for opportunities to get Ryan Helsley extra work, because the moment you start doing that, the next day is going to be a 2-1 game and you're going to wish you had him. And maybe you don't down the line as a result, especially during a stretch where the Cardinals play 16 games in 16 days. It's going to be a little bit quirky as well, because Sunday night, I believe they're playing the Cubs at night on Sunday, and then it's a 4 p.m. game in St. Louis against the Mets on Monday. Was originally scheduled to be an off day, but that is a postponed game that will be played out, just a 1-gamer against the Mets before the Cardinals welcome Dylan Carlson and the Rays to town. So you just don't want to get too cute with trying to bring in Ryan Helsley extra, because then things tend to go the other direction when you kind of bring on that sort of karma, and then you say, well, now Ryan Helsley's not available because he's been overworked. It's like you can't really have it both ways. So I feel like hindsight is the easiest way to nitpick a manager, and in this case, I just don't really have anything to say about Oli tonight. Look, and the notion that, well, once the game was tied, his job was over, so it's not a safe situation now. You should get John King in the game to face a left-hand. Stop. Please stop. It's just respectfully stop. It's not a thought process it's not an intelligent thought process, is the nicest way I can say it. And I love to, a lot of the times fans will say, why don't the reporters ask Oli the tough questions? Why don't they ask him why he didn't bring in John King? If you want to walk into Oli's office and ask him why he didn't bring in John King after Helsley had given up the tying run, you be my guest. Please. I implore you to do so. That's the kind of stuff that you don't live that down. Not an intelligent question if you know ball. Frankly. It's just not something that you can ask the manager of the St. Louis Cardinals unless you want to look like a person who doesn't know what's going on. So to the guy that insisted he knows more about baseball than me because he knew they should have brought in John King in the ninth. All right, bud. I would love to see the look on Oli's face when you ask him that question. I really would. It's just one of those things where hindsight is always going to win. You're always going to look like a genius because you are advocating for the position of the thing that should have happened instead of the terrible, no good, dirty, rotten loss that happened, right? It's not reality, though. Ryan Helsley pitches that ninth inning. It's just the way that it is, and sometimes he's going to blow a save. Tonight happened to be one of those nights, and I'm with you, Cardinals fans. It was not a great night for it because you had all the momentum in the world, and now it feels like it's all stunted and that it's going to be difficult to regain. We'll talk about the other aspects of this game. Like Sonny Gray was good, man. He was nails. 7 innings of 2-run baseball, gave up 5 hits, scattered them for the most part, just walked 1, 9 strikeouts. He gave up 1 home run. It's a pretty darn good game for Sonny Gray. That's what the ace is supposed to give you, and he did. I mean, he outdueled Shota Imanaga. Cardinals, we spent a lot of time on the big show this afternoon talking about the lineup. Oli Marmol basically stacking all the righties at the top and just daring them to deliver some punches to Shota Imanaga early. And we're going to stack our top 5 righties against you 1 through 5 and come what may. And that was a managerial decision that paid off, frankly. I mean, today you look at the top 5 in the order. Not a good day for Contreras. He goes 0 for 5 with a K out of the 2-hole. But outside of him, Mason Wynn 2 for 5 with a home run. Goldie was stinging the ball 3 for 5, had the home run in the first inning. So they started it off on the right note, scored a couple of runs. Arenado was 2 for 4 with a ribby. Pham was 2 for 5. That top 5 in the order where forget the right, left stuff that typically we see the Cardinals employ. In this particular situation, I think they wanted to set the tone and say, let's get to the starter. And lo and behold, the Cardinals had 12 hits in the game, and 10 of them were off of Imanaga across the 6 2/3 that he pitched. And he gave up the 2 homers to both Wynn and Goldie. 10 hits in total, pitched it into the 7th. He largely did his job, but the Cardinals, I mean, that's a 4-2 win that should have happened, right? At a minimum 4-3, but Helsley just wasn't able to hold it. That doesn't mean you suddenly are going to bring in John King for the ninth inning. I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine if Oli had done that, what that would say about the very little confidence that a manager would have in the all-star closer if that would be the course of his decision-making? Easy to say after because, well, you lost the game. I'm telling you what, man, Cards fans would have been climbing the walls if John King faced Mike Tauchman and Tauchman walked it off the way that he did against Helsley. That's just, you roll with your best arm and you sleep at night because of it. It's just one of those games that didn't go the Cardinals' way, but that's what's so sucky about it because it should have if the 33 times that Ryan Helsley is Ryan Helsley of normal, Cardinals win this game, and now you're talking about a team that's sitting, 5 games above 500. They've won 3 in a row. They're really starting to put it together, and you just feel like this kind of gets you stuck in the mud. And now you've got a tough weekend against the Cubs still to play. 3 games remain in this series against a team that, they're pretty well out of it as far as playoffs are concerned because they're 5 games under 500. It would take a lot for them to climb back in, and they were deadline sellers. But weekends at Wrigley are weird, man, and things can happen. If the Cubs suddenly go on a roll here, they're staring 500 in the face if they can just absolutely steamroll the Cardinals the next 3 days. Cardinals would be right at 500. Cubs will only be a game behind the Cardinals at the end of a 4-game sweep here if the Cubs should be able to put one of those together. I'm not saying I expect it, but it's just one of those things that weird things can happen at Wrigley, and you don't think the Cubs and the players in that clubhouse are motivated. Their front office might have said, hey, we're selling. We're not going to be threats in this thing. But the players may not have gotten the memo, and they're going to be more than willing to try to stick it to a division rival like the Cardinals. Eric Fedde is going to be the guy to go on Friday afternoon, 1:20 p.m. First pitch scheduled for Fedde v. Assad. Fedde is 7-4 with a 3.11 ERA this season. Cardinals are going to get their first look at the new acquisition, Eric Fedde. Gibby against Tyone on Saturday, and that is, I believe, a day game as well, 1:20 p.m. start. Man, that would be the night to be in Chicago. If I were there this weekend, you get out of Wrigley probably around 6 o'clock or so. I'd probably run back to the hostel or wherever I would have had to stay on the cheap and do a podcast. But then you've got like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. That's a good little window of time before you then get up on Sunday and you don't have to be at Wrigley until Sunday night. That would have been the ticket, but that's okay. We're going to have a lot of fun here in St. Louis and continuing the podcast. Honestly, it's tough to do the podcast when I am on road trips and trying to sneak into places to be able to find some peace and quiet and doing the show and not having my equipment. So podcast listeners probably end up winning by the fact that I am not at Wrigley this weekend. Sunday night, by the way, Miles Michaelis v. Justin Steele. That's not a matchup that I would give the Cardinals the advantage on when it comes to the pitching. And I guess at 6:10 start time, that is going to be an ESPN Sunday Night Baseball game because of the start time there. Saturday, Gibby versus Tyone. I'm going to call that one kind of a wash. Tyone's got better ERA. Fedde Assad, I'm going to lean Fedde, but it's going to be interesting to see. Like, Fedde's introduction to being a Cardinal is in this Cardinals-Cubs rivalry at Wrigley. So Friday afternoon matinee, businessman special, that's going to be a crowd that'll be getting after it at Wrigley. We'll see what Fedde's able to come up with, man. If he can make a good first impression, that would sure help, as the Cardinals are going to want to erase the vibes of this one because they played a clean game. As I mentioned, I was trying to allude to the top 5 in the order and give you what their total numbers were for the game. Those guys 1 through 5 came up with 9 of the Cardinals' 12 hits in the game. And like I said, only Contreras didn't have a multi-hit game, and he went over. So Newbar was 1 for 4, and then Ciani, bottom of the order, he's got the OPS up to 624 now, folks. Michael Ciani has been on a warpath recently for the St. Louis Cardinals, and that's really exciting to see because his skill set is so fun. What he does defensively to add now a pretty good offensive skill set over the past month plus to that is very refreshing for this Cardinal lineup. Unfortunately, they weren't able to get it done tonight. I think they were in position to have done it with what Goldschmidt and Mason Wynn gave you. You needed to win a tight one. You needed to win. Sometimes you just have to win the low-scoring games, and everything was set up for the Cardinals to be able to do that. Yep, it is. It's not to be gratuitous about it, but it was Ryan Helsley's L tonight that he took, but that doesn't have to be an indictment on what his season has been or what it's going to be moving forward. But it's a tough night to have a tough night for Ryan Helsley, and the Cardinals end up paying the price for it. So let me know your thoughts on the game, Cardinals fans. How does it make you feel about the rest of the weekend? Does it cause you to have a little bit of a lump in your throat going into Friday afternoon, or are you just excited to see what Eric Fetty could bring to the table? Let me know that as we roll along here on B-Schaeff Daily. Let's go ahead and finish up, though, as we always do, or we often like to, with Down on the Farm. It's time to go Down on the Farm. Brought to you by Hastings Layers Premium Eggs.
You'll be happier than a jackass eating thistle.
Huh? Checking out the farm report, really not anything to mention about the Double-A Springfield Cardinals. They lose to Tulsa 10-8. Not anything too noteworthy. Buck Berger, I think we saw him a bit in spring training. Had a 1-for-3 day, had a home run, I assume was maybe a 3-run shot from him. Chandler Redmond's down there at Double-A, and that's been a bummer because he is an older player, not a prospect, and has not been able to advance beyond Double-A at age 27. Had some really big numbers last year, and this year the numbers have certainly been down for him, but he homered tonight, so that's good to see. Not really much else to say about the Springfield Cardinals. We'll give you the AAA report, though, because Steven Matz threw in the game tonight for Memphis against the Durham Bulls. Memphis won the game 9-6, and Matz threw a couple of innings, as I believe he was scheduled to do. A total of 30 pitches as he works his way back toward returning to the Cardinals. In what role? I was asked that this morning, and my answer is I have no idea. We're going to wait and see. First of all, he's got to get back healthy, and I don't think there's just going to be automatically a starting spot waiting for Steven Matz, even with the news of Lance Lynn going on the injured list. But I'm just let's see Steven Matz get back built up and healthy and ready to go, and then you'll kind of see from there. I'm not saying it's impossible that he could come back and be effective, but he's sort of an afterthought until he forces the issue with good performance down there in the rehab games. Could he join the bullpen? A number of things could happen. Let's see him throw a few more times. I think it'll be a lengthy enough rehab where the Cardinals can get a good handle and a feel for what he's like down there and what role they could potentially use him in once he returns to the Cardinals. And I do assume that he will if healthy, but we'll wait and see on that. 2 innings pitched, though, for Matz. Gave up a solo home run. Didn't walk anybody. Couple of strikeouts. The homer was the only hit that he allowed, so that's at least a positive development for him, I think, in his first assignment. One bad pitch potentially is all that you really chalk it up to, and you kind of go from there. Jordan Walker was 1 for 5, scored a run in this one. It was a double, his 19th of the season down there with Memphis. Matt Koperniak is the guy to talk about tonight from an offensive standpoint for the Memphis Redbirds. He goes 5 for 5 with 3 doubles and 5 RBIs. Scored a run in the game. He's got a 319 average and an 885 OPS. Yeah, he's somebody that could sneakily get a call-up later on in the season. They'd have to put him on the 40-man, but if they need an outfielder right now, I think it's probably Koperniak above Walker and above Victor Scott, who, though, is starting to come around a little bit. He went 2 for 5 with a run scored, also 2 runs driven in for Vic. So good to see that. And as we mentioned, Steven Matz back on the mend here, trying to see if he can't make his way back to the Cardinals. That's the news from AAA, and then I'll give you the report from down in Palm Beach. J.J. Weatherholt DHing today for the Palm Beach Cardinals. That's the low-A affiliate there. 0 for 3 in the game, but did walk and score. So that is the number 7 overall pick out of West Virginia, still finding his bearings there at low-A for the St. Louis Cardinals. Mentioned some roster stuff that I wanted to make sure to address before we got out of here. I believe I did mention earlier the fact that obviously Fetty and Armstrong called in as the Cardinals needed to activate those 2 players to the active roster by today. And the 2 that end up going out are the 2 that we told you yesterday would. McGreevy, he was great. He's put himself on the radar, and there will be another chance for him down the line, I'm sure. But he goes back to Memphis, as does Ryan Ludus, who threw a scoreless inning tonight, by the way, back with the Redbirds. So, busy couple of days for Ludus. He throws a scoreless inning for the Cardinals. He goes back to Memphis and throws one for them. I believe they're in Durham on the road this week. Pretty sure anyway, unless they were at home. It doesn't really matter. I'm not going to look it back up. I'll figure it out tomorrow because we do need to get out of here. But the other thing that I wanted to mention was Nick Raposo claimed on waivers by the Blue Jays. Kind of a bummer for the Cardinals catching depth as it is. He was put on the on waivers, put as a designated for assignment a couple of days ago with all the trades going on. I can't remember specifically which day it was for Raposo, but that was one where you're like, okay, they called him up when Herrera was injured and Wilson wasn't quite ready to come back yet, was just here in St. Louis for a couple few days, and then he was back to Memphis, but was still on the 40-man. So when you needed the 40-man spot, It's obviously a natural guy to bump off because he had a 600 OPS in Memphis, hitting 193 in AAA. You didn't really expect that he would be claimed, but he was. Catchers are hard to come by, and I think Raposo does a nice job behind the plate. So Cardinals probably did not anticipate Raposo getting claimed, and that may mean they need to kind of add some catching depth within the organization. I'm not exactly sure what form that could take, but something to keep in mind because, like I said, I don't think the Cardinals were necessarily anticipatory of Raposo getting claimed. Made me think just out loud about what's going on these days with my guy Joe Hudson. And maybe he's on the Cubs right now in their AAA. The Iowa Cubs, is that possible? Always like Joe Hudson. Want to see the Cardinals get him back. But he was with the Mets earlier this year. And let me see now. Yeah, I can't find him. I have no idea where Joe Hudson is. But anyway, I don't know what the Cardinals are going to do, but they're probably going to maybe down the line in the organization find the need for another catcher. If you happen to be somebody out there that has info on that and says, hey, here's what they need to do or what they did do, well, you might know more than me because I'm just trying to read on the Google machine of what's going on there. Looks like Joe Hudson is still with the Mets. I don't know. Maybe he was with the Cubs minor league for a second or something, but he did get up for one game with the Mets this year. I think he was on that trip to London, actually. Joe Hudson was. And if you remember him, he was Cardinal backup catcher a few years ago. And he's on the 7-day injured list down there in Syracuse. Okay, that's what it is. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the show. We'll be back at it on Friday evening after the Cardinals' afternoon game against the Cubs at Wrigley. Eric Fetty will make his debut, so we'll talk about it on B-Shape Daily Friday night. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and go ahead and go to Spotify or Apple Podcasts and follow the B-Shape Daily Podcast on those platforms as well to make me look better than I actually am. All right, that'll do it. Appreciate you guys as always, and we'll talk to you next time on B-Shape Daily. Peace.